Hey everybody, welcome to 4.4 example B and C. You have learned how to write linear equations in two different forms. Intercept form, which is y equals a plus bx, and point slope form, which is y equals y1 plus b, parentheses x minus x1. In the second part of the investigation, some of the equations had x and y on the same side, as in 12x plus 2y equals negative 6. Equations in the form ax plus by equals c are in something called standard form. What other equation in the investigation is in standard form? And it is 6x plus y equals 4. And you might say, well, there's no b there. Remember, if we just have y, that's the same as saying 1y. So it's really saying 6x plus 1y equals 4. No matter what form you start with, you can always rewrite any linear equation in intercept form. Then, it's easy to recognize equivalent equations. Let's review properties that help you change the form of an equation. Alright, so let's look at the distributive property, which you already have example A, right? You distribute A, and A could be any number. It could be a whole number. It could also be a fraction. So if we want to write like 1/6, we could do all of that as well. We have the commutative property. A plus B is the same as B plus A. We have the commutative property of multiplication. A times B equals B times A. We have the associative property of addition. A plus B plus C equals A plus B, then plus C. So you can add them in any order. And the associative property of multiplication, which means you can multiply them in any order. All right? Good. Here are some other properties of equality. Given that A equals B for any number C, A plus C equals B plus C. That's the addition property of equality. A minus C equals B minus C. That's obviously the subtraction property of equality. A times C equals B times C. That's a multiplication property of equality. And A divided by C equals B divided by C when C is not equal to 0. Why can't C be 0? Well, if I do A divided by 0, I get a big problem. The only real big problem in math is when you divide by 0. So that's called division property as long as C isn't 0. But that's not really going to be a big deal for a lot of us. Okay, so let's do example B. Is the equation y equals 2 plus 3 parentheses x minus 1 equivalent to 6x minus 2y equals 2? Well, we know that this one is in point slope form, right? And this one is in standard form. And you say, Mr. Bartman, how did you know that? Well, if I remember point slope form, it was y equals y1 plus b parentheses x minus x1. Right? So that looks exactly the same as this one. And that's standard form, right? Standard form is just ax plus by equals c. Alright, so what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and rewrite this one so that way it's just y equals. Alright, so what we're going to do first is we're going to distribute that 3 to both sides. So I'm going to start off with y equals 2. And I'm going to distribute that 3 right now. 3 times x is going to be positive 3x. And 3 times negative 1. A lot of people kind of mess this up. They forget about the minus. So either put in the minus right away or change it to adding the opposite. Either one will work. Well, 3 times negative 1 is going to be negative 3. Alright, so I've got 2 plus 3x plus negative 3. So I can say this is the same as y equals, combine my like terms here, 2 and the negative 3. Well, 2 and negative 3 is negative 1 plus 3x. So now I have it solved for y. I can do the same thing for this one. I have 6x minus 2y. Oh, that doesn't look like a y, it looks like an x, minus 2y. That still looks like an x. Let's try this again. Minus 2y equals 2. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to solve for y here. So that means I have to get rid of some other stuff, right? So I multiply by this negative 2 first, and then I'm going to add the 6x. So if I want to undo all that stuff, right, I want to subtract the 6x first. I want to subtract the other stuff, subtract 6x from this side. And the 2 and the 6x are not like terms, so I'm not going to be able to combine those. So these add together, I get nothing. I get negative 2y equals 2 minus 6x. Okay, so far so good. And now I want to divide by negative 2, right? Divide by negative 2. And if I divide one side by negative 2, I have to divide both sides by negative 2. Alright, so then I end up with this. Y equals 2 minus 6x over negative 2. And now we say, well, I want to be able to simplify that, but I have to do all this stuff first, and then I have to divide. But if we go back and we use some of our properties here, like the distributive property. The distributive property also works with division. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to divide this by negative 2 and this by negative 2. So it's kind of like distributing the division to both parts. So I can say that's the same as y equals 2 divided by negative 2, and then minus 6x divided by negative 2. All right, what's 2 divided by negative 2? Well, that's going to be negative 1. And then negative 6, I'm just going to change that to plus and negative 6. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is going to be a positive 3x. So now I have y equals negative 1 plus 3x, and I have y equals negative 1 plus 3x. So are they equivalent? Yes. We can say the equations are equivalent. It's just a funny way of saying equivalent. That means they have the exact same line. They just are represented in different equations. And I got them both into the slope-intercept form because that's the easiest way to convert both of them. Alright, so here's our next and last example. Solve the equation 3x plus 4 divided by 6 minus 5 equals 7. Identify the property of equality used in each step. So we're going to be looking at this right here, these properties of equality. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take x and multiply it by 3. That's my first step. My second step is I'm going to add 4, right? My third step is I'm going to divide by 6. And my last step, I'm going to subtract 5. Okay, so those are my 4 steps, okay? So what I want to do first is I want to undo all that stuff. So let's rewrite this over here. So I get 3x plus 4 divided by 6 minus 5 equals 7. Alright, so what we're going to do first is I'm going to set up a little table here. We're going to go like this. Alright, and so I want to undo my last step first, right? How do I undo subtract 5? Well, hopefully you're saying in your head, I know, you add 5, right? So I'm going to add 5 to one side, and I add 5 to the other. Well, what says I can add 5 to both sides of an equal sign? That's the addition property of equality. So I'm going to be able to use this. I'm going to say addition prop of, and to make it a little bit faster, I'm going to write equals. Addition property of equality, all right? So I end up with, my equation is going to be 3x plus 4 divided by 6 equals, well, 7 plus 5 is 12. All right, good. So my next step was, so I got rid of the 4. Now I'm saying my third step was divide by 6. Well, how do I undo divide by 6? Well, I want to multiply by 6, right? Undo division is by multiplying. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. And what says I can multiply both sides of an equation by 6? Well, that would be the multiplication property of equality. So we're going to say that is the multiplication property of equality. Alright, so when I do that, I end up with the multiply 6 and divide by 6, they just cancel out, and I end up with 3x plus 4 equals, and what's 6 times 12? Well, 6 times 10 is 60, and 6 times 2 is 12, so 60 plus 12 is 72. Alright, so now we have those. So the next thing I should do is get rid of this 3, and now I have my second step was to add 4. So how do I undo add 4? I'm going to subtract 4, and I end up, well, why can I subtract 4 from both sides? What says I can do that? Well, that would be the subtraction property of equality. Alright, so we're going to say this is the subtraction property of equality. Alright, so then we end up with 3x equals 72 minus 4 is 68. Okay, good. So now we have one more thing that we have to do here, and that is to get rid of the 3. Well, how do I get rid of multiply by 3? That's divide by 3, and if I divide one side by 3, I have to divide the other side by 3. And when I divide both sides by 3, what property am I using? Well, that is the division property of equality. So that is the division property of equality. And so what I would like you to tell me is, what does x equal? Good luck.